Welcome back to our Life Group Bible study on the book of Ruth. We're going to be in chapter 2 this evening, so if you have your Bibles with you, go ahead and turn there now. And just as a little refresher, we left Naomi and Ruth as just returning back from Moab. So they spent some time in Moab, but they are returned to Bethlehem in order to spend time with family and hopefully be better provided for and taken care of. Now, while they did return to family, it still was not easy for two widows. They had no husbands, no sons, and so it was very difficult for any widows during this time period in a Jewish culture. And so we are taking up with our reading at this point at verse 1 in chapter 2, so follow along with me. Now there was a wealthy and influential man in Bethlehem named Boaz, who was a relative of Naomi's husband, Elimelech. One day Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go out into the harvest fields to pick up the stalks of grain left behind by anyone who is kind enough to let me do it." I want to pause right here for a second. Understand Jewish culture at this time. Now it sounds like she's just kind of hoping to get lucky by going around these harvesters and these fields of grain and hope that there's things that the people missed. But it wasn't exactly luck. There was actually Jewish protocol and just cultural norms here stated that all harvesters, all people that owned crops and land, were required to leave the corners unharvested and to not be real picky and careful about harvesting all the grain. They're supposed to leave the edges, the corners, and just different stalks here and there for the poor, the helpless, the widows, the orphans to come along in these fields and harvest the grain that didn't have anything for themselves. So it was kind of like a government assistance program here, but it was not officially governed by any organization. It was just the cultural norm. And so Ruth wants to go along behind the harvesters and hopefully gather some grain for her and Naomi. What I love about this is she does not wait for some direct calling from God to do this act. Now, they are in a tough situation. And it's very tempting when you find yourself in a brand new situation, in a very difficult situation, whether it's financial or relational or whatever it might be, to kind of be paralyzed and not know what to do. Paralyzed by fear, paralyzed by just how awkward and unusual the circumstances is to your experiences. And so there's a tendency to just sit there and wait for God to rescue you and wait for God to just have this light shine down from heaven and reveal what you're supposed to do because you are in this very difficult situation. But I want to challenge you, when you get in a situation where you don't know what to do, take the first steps in initiative yourself. Show integrity by just taking all the circumstances and all the information that you have and choose the best step that you can make at this point. And for people that are out of work, sometimes it's taking a much lesser job. Maybe it's a job that they wouldn't normally enjoy, or it doesn't really work with their normal schedule, or it doesn't pay nearly as much. But sometimes God is going to reward us by taking steps of what we can do to provide for our family and show that we're willing to do anything and we have a strong work ethic. And when we take those first steps, then God rewards us and actually reveals the path as we're walking. Sometimes he doesn't reveal that path until we start taking steps. So do whatever you can to make good decisions until God reveals. This also has to do with ministry work. Maybe God has put a call in your life to be in full-time ministry, or be a missionary, or maybe even just serve more in the church, but you don't know what that step is. Well, do this. Serve in some capacity. Don't wait for the perfect serving job that you're going to do for the rest of your life. No, serve in some capacity, and maybe God will open some doors up because you're showing yourself to be faithful and a person of integrity. It'll be noticed by church leaders, other people, and then God opens that door for you. And this is what Ruth does. She takes the initiative. She takes the first steps. So she's out in the field. Let's keep reading, though, following up with verse 2 still. Naomi replied, "All right, my daughter, go ahead." So Ruth went out to gather grain behind the harvesters. And as it happened, she found herself working in a field that belonged to Boaz, the relative of her father-in-law, Elimelech. While she was there, Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters. "The Lord be with you," he said. "The Lord bless you," the harvesters replied. Then Boaz asked his foreman, "Who is that young woman over there? Who does she belong to?" And the foreman replied, "She is the young woman from Moab who came back with Naomi. She asked me this morning if she could gather grain behind the harvesters. She has been hard at work ever since, except for a few minutes' rest in the shelter." Boaz went over and said to Ruth, "Listen, my daughter, stay right here with us when you gather grain. Don't go to any other fields. Stay right behind the young women working in my field. See which part of the field they are harvesting and then follow them. I have warned the young men not to treat you roughly. And when you are thirsty, help yourself to the water they have drawn from the well." So here's the first point I want to draw from this passage. Hard work gets noticed. Hard work gets noticed. And let's just be honest here. Another point that I could have made here is that beautiful women get free stuff. Beautiful women just get free stuff. Women get free drinks, they get free mechanical help, they get free advice, they get bigger tips, they're much easier to get a job. A beautiful woman never has to open a door with their arms full, because you know why? Because there's always some guy noticing her out of the corner of his eye, and they will be the first one there to open that door for them. Beautiful women just have it easier. And I'm guessing that Ruth was a hottie here, because Boaz shows up on the scene and he notices her right away and wants to know what's her story? Where is she from? But what gets her benefits, what reaps good consequences for her, is that she worked so hard. She worked so hard that this foreman, who doesn't care anything about this particular woman, noticed that she worked it hard the entire time. And not only that, she did it with a great attitude. She came to the foreman and requested if she could go ahead and harvest in his fields. So that was probably unusual. Most people just took it as their right and did it. She requested it, and then she busted her tail the entire afternoon without hardly any break. And so because of this, she gets noticed by the foreman. The foreman passes along this information to Boaz, and he's even more impressed by her integrity. And hard work always gets noticed. I remember as a manager for FedEx Ground, it was a tough job for our package handlers, because I was on the load side for part of the time I was there. And so what would you have is you have this conveyor belt lined with vans and bulk trucks. And then you would have these packages coming down this conveyor belt nonstop, all night long, package after package after package. Sometimes big clumps of packages would come down this conveyor belt. And so you were constantly taking the packages and putting them in the van or the truck. And it could be demoralizing at times, so much so that we've had people that have showed up and worked an hour and just left. We've had lots of people work one day and not come back. So I always try to train our new employees for at least a week or two, give them lots of help, kind of scaffold them into that position so it wasn't so tough on them. But one particular night, I was down 3 people, and we had a brand new hire. I didn't know what to do. I knew I was going to have a rough night, but what I decided to do was take this new hire. I didn't have the time to train him. I picked the easiest truck to explain. It wasn't the easiest truck to load. It was just the easiest truck to explain. This big bulk truck had only about 10 stops. So I told them where each stop went, but you're going to get a lot of packages, man. Just keep up as best you can. I'll come back as soon as I can and help you as much as I can. But I ended up loading 6 vans by myself, 2 guys' job, on the other side of the conveyor belt, because it didn't matter to FedEx Ground. You were short men. You didn't go slower. You just had to suck it up. And so I didn't get back to this employee for most of the night. And so I came down there expecting, I was worried that he would walk off the job. I was also expecting a calamity down there with just stacks of boxes everywhere. I was amazed. I showed up at this bulk truck, and there were no packages laying outside. There were no packages at the end of the conveyor belt. I looked inside. They were all stacked neatly inside the truck. I was blown away. I wanted to shake this guy's hand. I wanted to hug him. I was like, you are my new favorite employee. And believe me, when Employee of the Month came up that month, his was the first name I put in there because of his work ethic. He was the person that, when the raises came up for a review, I definitely gave him a raise. When he asked for a different van because he wanted to have a little bit easier load, I was like, yes, you've shown me integrity and you've shown me work ethic. I'm going to help you out. And I remember one night he didn't show up for work. He was a no-call, no-show, which happens on third shift, but it's kind of a big deal too. But when he showed up the next day and told me he just overslept, I didn't make a big deal of it. I cut him a break because of what he had done with every other night where he worked so hard for me. He was a good employee. And if you are a good employee, and if you show work ethic and you show determination, it is going to be noticed. And you might not get financially rewarded right then, with a raise or whatever. but you are going to have people are going to have a higher opinion of you. You're going to reap benefits, and it might be the benefit that you can share Christ easier with people because they respect you. They respect your work ethic and they respect your integrity, so they will actually listen to what you have to say about Jesus Christ. And so hard work always gets noticed. All right, let's read now in verse 10. Ruth fell at his feet and thanked him warmly. "What have I done to deserve such kindness?" she asked. "I am only a foreigner." "Yes, I know," Boaz replied, "but I also know about everything you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband. I have heard how you left your father and mother and your own land to live here among complete strangers. May the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge, reward you fully for what you have done." "I hope I continue to please you, sir," she replied. "You have comforted me by speaking so kindly to me, even though I am not one of your workers." At mealtime, Boaz called to her, "Come over here and help yourself to some food. You can dip your bread in your sour wine." So she sat with his harvesters, and Boaz gave her some roasted grain to eat. She ate all she wanted and still had some left over. When Ruth went back to work again, Boaz ordered his young men, "Let her gather grain right among the sheaves without stopping her, and pull out some heads of barley from the bundles and drop them on purpose for her. Let her pick them up and don't give her a hard time." So Ruth gathered barley there all day, and when she beat out the grain that evening, it filled an entire basket. She carried it back into town and showed it to her mother-in-law. Ruth also gave her the roasted grain that was left over from her meal. All right, and here brings my next point. It's this. Thankfulness fosters more generosity. Thankfulness fosters more generosity. And again, I could bring up that Ruth was hot because I don't know that all these things would have happened without her beauty here and Boaz's attraction. But do understand that Boaz did not think he had a chance with Ruth. He was not doing this because he was hoping that they could be together. He was much older than Ruth. Ruth came from a foreign land. There were a couple different scenarios here and different things that would make Boaz think that there was no chance with that. So he is not doing this out of personal gain or to woo Ruth. Not at all. And we're going to see that later in the other chapters that this is the case. But it's not just her beauty here, because I love Ruth's response. I'm actually wowed by Ruth's response, because Ruth could have had a complaining spirit and we would understand it. She had her husband die, so she's been a widow. And during the 10 years that she was married, she didn't give birth, and that was unusual. And then she's moving to a foreign land where she doesn't know the customs and the people very well, so she feels out of sorts. She's had a rough life, and it would be very tempting to have an attitude of, finally, I'm getting something good to happen to me. I deserve a break. I deserve something good to happen in my life for once. That's not her attitude. Look at her attitude. She fell at his feet and thanked him just for saying, "Follow my harvesters. Just be in my contingent of poor people following my harvesters." She falls at his feet for his notice of her and says, "What have I done to deserve such kindness? I am only a foreigner." She doesn't think of herself as anything worthy of this attention, of this kindness, and she is extremely thankful. And the result, you see it here, is that Boaz wants to treat her even more warmly and even more kindly. So he invites her over to dip her bread in his wine. He also invites her to stay in the shade. He also tells his workers to make her life easier by purposely pulling out some of the barley and the grain and leaving it for her, so that she leaves this place with this huge bag of food that she can take home to Naomi, when it would have been extremely difficult to glean that much in one day or even a couple days worth. She got this easily because she was thankful and Boaz appreciated it. And this does make a huge difference. I know working with the church, we often are facilitating donations and helping people out and kind of taking care of people. And there's many examples of this, but I remember one family in particular who was regularly in need, constantly needed formula and diapers and gas cards and clothes and food. And they had a lot of kids, and we had a heart for them, and so we wanted to help them. And at the beginning, they were fairly thankful for it. But it rapidly became more and more a sense of entitlement to these things that we were giving them. So much so that we would give them diapers and formula, and they would complain about the brand name. Like, we only use this kind of brand of diapers and this kind of brand of formula that works so much better. Like, okay, I'll try to notice the brand name next time. And then, it actually got to the point where we would give them a $50 gas card or something like that to help them get by, and they would roll their eyes and be upset that it wasn't more. It got to the point where when people found out that we were gathering donations for this family, they didn't want to give because there was just such ingratitude in their response. And that is the way it is. When you give to someone that shows no gratitude, it kind of kills any desire in you to keep on giving. On the other spectrum, we've given people something as small as a cooked meal or $25 grocery card so they get by a tough time. And they have literally received that and broken down and wept and hugged us and thanked us so much from the bottom of their heart. And that meant so much to them. They received it like a gift from God. And when that happens, well, I just want to pull out my wallet and hand over the credit card and say, go wild. I don't care what you spend it on. When you see that kind of gratitude, it fills your heart and you just want to give more. Don't think our Heavenly Father works much differently. Like, he's so much more generous and giving and loving and thoughtful, but he also likes a grateful spirit. He likes a heart that is filled with gratitude, and he is going to reward people that are actually thankful for what he is going to give them, and he's not going to reward people who show a spirit of entitlement nearly as much so. And so this is important. And so how can we be more thankful? I read a book recently by our very own Vonda Skelton, Seeing Through the Lies, and she makes a great point. She pulled this from somebody else, but she talked about this exercise where to write down 5 things that you're thankful for each day for 30 days. And I think if we all did that, if we would take 30 days and commit to writing down 5 things that we're thankful for each day, I think it would change us. And you can't repeat anything. That's the kicker right there. And why that is significant is that's 150 things that you're thankful for in one month. And you'll find yourself very soon, after about the first or second week, you're going to find yourself having to think outside the box. We always thank God for a house over our head, and maybe food, family, our church. But we don't often think outside the box of all the things that God blesses us with, especially living in Greenville, South Carolina, in America. Delicious drinking water and tap water that we can just have out of the faucet, plumbing, air conditioning, just all the different things that we get to experience and enjoy. We have so much to be grateful for. And if we open our minds up to all the things that we have to be grateful for, we won't be nearly as discontent as we usually are. We won't feel nearly as entitled when we're actually expressing thankfulness to God. So I want to challenge you, write down something that you're thankful for, 5 things that you're thankful for every day for 30 days. Give it a try, see if it doesn't change you. And if it does, keep doing it. Keep thinking of things that you're thankful for. All right, but let's keep reading now. Actually, I don't want to keep reading. I want to make a second point of a part that we already read, and this is my point number 3. Older Christians need to speak life into newer Christians. Older Christians need to speak life into newer Christians. I love this, what Boaz does here, and I'm going to go back to verses 10 and 11. So Ruth falls down at his feet, at Boaz's feet, thanks him, shows an attitude of I'm not worthy. And this is Boaz's response. Yes, I know you're only a foreigner, but I also know that everything you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband. I have heard how you left your father and mother in your own land to live here among complete strangers. May the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge, reward you fully for what you have done. Boaz here speaks life into Ruth. All right, Ruth feels like she is an undeserving foreigner, someone that isn't worthy of being looked at, to being taken care of, to be shown kindness. And he says, no. You have shown yourself to be a woman of integrity. I have seen your faithfulness to your mother-in-law. I have seen your work ethic. I've seen your integrity, and it is worthy of being praised and to being honored. And he speaks life into her and gives her a whole new understanding of who she is. And often when we have new Christians that truly understand the gospel and what God did for them, they have this amazing spirit of gratitude. They are so thankful, and they get how undeserving they are of this gift from God. They understand that they are sinners, saved by grace. They understand that they deserve hell, and then they get heaven. They get to experience eternity in fellowship with their Heavenly Father and this family and the perks of being a child of God, and they are overwhelmed by it. And they also recognize how little they know about Scripture and how messed up they were before they knew Christ. And because of this, the enemy will come in this period of excitement and this period of rapid growth and this period of wanting to just consume everything they can about God. And he'll come in there and constantly remind them that they know so little, that they are so undeserving of this gift, that they don't deserve heaven and all these things that they're being gifted by. And as a result, they don't take those next steps of being a mature believer. But if we, as mature believers who have experienced God's grace over a long period of time and have grown in our understanding and knowledge of God, would speak life into new believers and say, no, you can do that. No, you are worthy of that. Yes, I can see the potential in you, and I think God has great things in store for you. You are on the right path. You are doing the right thing. You are a man or woman of integrity. If we'll speak life into them, it will help them take that next step to actually embracing that role and embracing their status as a child of God who is worthy, not on their own merit, but because of God, because of what God has given them, they are worthy of a status in his kingdom. And so, and I'm telling you, we have life group leaders who would laugh you out of the room if you told them 5 years ago that they'd be leaders in the church, that they'd be leading other people in a small group. They would laugh you right out of the room. That would be crazy talking to them. But they've been able to do this because they have embraced God, and then they have also had people speak into their lives saying, you can do this. I can see the leadership ability in you. You can do this. And because of that, they have embraced that role and they've thrived in that role. And we need to do that for all new believers. We need to be there and disciple them and scaffold them and put them in positions of authority rather than just keep the status quo of here are our leaders and our spiritual gurus, and these are the people that are just immature believers. I love what Boaz does here, and he takes her to an elevated status. All right, let's keep reading and finish the chapter up with verse 19. Where did you gather all this grain today? Naomi asked. Where did you work? May the Lord bless the one who helped you. So Ruth told her mother-in-law about the man in whose field she had worked. She said, the man I worked with today is named Boaz. May the Lord bless him, Naomi told her daughter-in-law. He is showing his kindness to us as well as to your dead husband. That man is one of our closest relatives, one of our family redeemers. Then Ruth said, what's more, Boaz even told me to come back and stay with his harvesters until the entire harvest is completed. Good, Naomi exclaimed. Do as he said, my daughter. Stay with his young women right through the whole harvest. You might be harassed in other fields, but you'll be safe with him. So Ruth worked alongside the women in Boaz's fields and gathered grain with them until the end of the barley harvest. Then she continued working with them through the wheat harvest in early summer, and all the while she lived with her mother-in-law. All right, couple explanations about this time period. If you read Ruth, you get this feeling that, especially because Boaz is such a good man, that everything was this was a very safe, secure culture. Please remember that this is at the end of the period of the Judges, and if you've ever read Judges, then you'll know that no period in Judges was a really safe, easygoing time period. It is a time of incredible violence and a lot of warring, a lot of pain, a lot of violence. Read through Judges and you'll see what I'm talking about. And so this is a big deal. That Boaz offered his protection and told Ruth to stay in his fields, provided her with incredible amount of protection because he references it, and also Naomi references it, but he's told his men that to not deal roughly with her. And Naomi says, you might be harassed by other men. It would not be uncommon for a beautiful widow that is poor and destitute, falling in the harvest, to be taken and raped by somebody in the fields. That wouldn't be out of the ordinary for this time period. And so the fact that she is protected from those kind of dangers is huge here. And when she comes home, Naomi is blown away. She sees how much she has, and she knows something is up. There is no way Ruth could come home with all this grain and barley just on her own merit. Something happened. So she asked, where did you get this? How did you get this much? And so Ruth reveals to her just Boaz and his generosity. And already Naomi's probably starting to scheme here because she mentions that Boaz is one of their family redeemers. And what she is talking about here is, again, back to that cultural thing I talked about last week, is when someone would be widowed, it was expected that someone in the family would redeem that widow, especially if she did not have children, would redeem that widow by marrying her in the family and providing a son for her so that her legacy and her dead husband's legacy could live on. So that's what it meant by redemption. You have redemption through continuing that legacy line. And Boaz is one of the family redeemers, which is obviously going to play a big role in future chapters. But here is the point that I want to pull from this, and it's this. We all need a covering. We all need a covering. Now, it's very obvious that Ruth needed a covering to keep her safe from people that could potentially harm her and potentially rape her. Also, the covering that Boaz provided her with food, sustenance to get by. So her covering here was very necessary, but I am going to submit to you the idea that we all need a covering. We all benefit from a covering. Over and over again, we see how important submission is in the Word of God. Even Christ, who was the creator of the universe, submitted to first his parents and then to the religious leaders of the time period as he was growing up and learning and growing. And then to the authorities and the government. He submitted over and over again. He even just submitted to his disciples at times and served them. But there was this spirit of submission and not assuming control and not assuming authority all the time. And God has designed the universe and the world to work this way, that we are so much better when we have a hierarchy and we are submitting properly to authority and embracing the covering that God naturally set up. And for you sports fans out there like me, I can kind of use a football analogy. If you have two starting quarterbacks, you have no starting quarterbacks. All right, that's like a common phrase there. You have two starting quarterbacks, it's like you have no quarterbacks because it disrupts a team, it doesn't work out, things are discombobulated. Now, there could be two quarterbacks that are equally talented and have special skills that when you don't know which one is the better quarterback, but it's always better to choose one to be in charge because the team needs to rally behind that because everyone on the field works better with strong authority. It's the same way with bosses. Have you ever had two bosses that kind of oversee your work area? It's kind of like not having a boss because both bosses think the other one is kind of taking care of what they should be taking care of, and it's not happening. Things fall through the crack all the time. It is very aggravating not having a boss. So maybe you enjoy it because you like to be independent, because it's like you have no oversight when you have two bosses. It works so much better when you have one boss, even when it's a bad boss, that you know what's going on and know what to expect. And I've had a lot of bad bosses. I've had some that I did not have much respect for, but what's interesting is even when I had a really bad boss, when I respected their authority and worked underneath them, I was so much more successful. I was able to do and accomplish so much more. But I remember times where I got sarcastic or disrespectful and kind of bucked up to authority. It made my life a living hell. I mean, it was stressful. I had trouble focusing at work, outside of work. It was still stressful and it was affecting the home life. It was a big deal to buck that authority, even though my boss was being a jerk and being unreasonable. It didn't make my life any easier by pointing that out. But when I respected him, even when he was being ridiculous, I was able to do so much more. And so I think it's the same way. And I know this whole idea kind of rubs women the wrong way sometimes because the Bible has put men in an authority position in the home. But understand, it is not saying that you are a lesser person. Scripture makes it very clear that men and women are equal in God's eyes and have equal worth and merit. But establishing a structure as God does actually makes you so much more capable. You are able to fulfill your potential and your role so much easier with a covering. Everyone does. Everyone is more productive with a covering. So even if your husband is a lot less intelligent and a lot less capable than you will find that you will be able to be a better you because you respect that dynamic in the home. Same way with kids and parents, same way like I talked about with bosses, same way in the church world, in the leadership there. When you buck authority, and especially the authority that God places in your life, it never goes well for you, including the government we have. Some people are really upset with the way the government, the direction it's heading. But we're responsible for that. We kind of get to choose, and God gives us the kings, the rulers, the presidents that we deserve. And so we have to change who we are and work under that authority to the best of our ability to change the dynamic and be more deserving of wise leadership in general. One last example for this I want to point out is cops. I mean, this is a hot button topic right now, but I love that we give cops authority because it makes our lives so much safer and so much easier. Can you imagine the anarchy that would happen if we didn't have anyone to watch over whether people were driving like maniacs or were robbing or stealing or injuring other people? I am so thankful that we have men and women that serve as cops that will come, and I gladly submit to their authority. And when you submit to their authority, you rarely have any problems. When you submit to their authority, society works and functions extremely well. When we buck authority of like cops, that's when it comes to really tense moments and actions and all kinds of drama. We don't want to remove that from our society. It's impossible. It would turn into anarchy. But when we have that covering, we can go about our lives and not even think about cops, not even think about problems, not thinking about our lives being in danger because we as a society have submitted to that authority. And so it's so important. And an interesting study on kids, which I love, and I've referenced it a couple different times, is they studied kids playing on a playground. And they sent kids out on a playground that had no fence. It was very fascinating that the kids would only stay on one side of the playground, very close to the teachers, and play in this very small circle, which was odd because there was no fence. They could have wandered anywhere in hundreds of yards. They could have gone in any direction, but they did not feel safe to do that. And naturally, not being told, they just naturally stayed close to the teachers on this side of the playground. When a fence was put around the playground, the kids were often seen climbing on the fence, around the fence, in every area, and they spread out to a greater area of the playground. Why? Because they felt safe. They knew where the boundaries were. And God is going to give us boundaries. He has given us a covering in His Word. He has said, this is what you should do. You stay within this covering, you stay within these boundaries, it is going to go well for you. You're going to be safe and protected. And so I am thankful that He has put those boundaries and parameters there. And within those boundaries, we can accomplish and do so much more than we could without having any of those boundaries. These boundaries are not restricting, they are freeing. They're keeping us from danger and keeping us within a safe proximity that we can better serve God and we can better enjoy our family and our lives. All right, that was a lot on Ruth today, but so that finishes chapter 2. In chapter 3, we're going to see a little bit of the romance starting between Ruth and Boaz. So I hope you read ahead and join us next week.